A few days ago, I released my Sea of Thieves review, which is a game I had a lot of fun with and enjoyed quite a lot. However, what I noticed from everyone's feedback is how polarizing the game is. Some love it, and some seriously hate it. Whether it's a lack of content, repetition, lack of endgame, no character progression, or even that's just no fun. People have a lot of issues with this game. The problem is, Sea of Thieves is not the first, and certainly won't be the last game that suffers from these issues, which leaves a bad taste in many gamers' mouths. Games like Destiny, The Division, GTA 5 with GTA Online, and Battlefront 2 have paved the way for Sea of Thieves. Each of these games focuses on the games as a service model, and through doing so may have already dug their own graves. Is Sea of Thieves truly dead on arrival? And why did Star Wars Battlefront 2 make gamers so angry in 2017? Today, we're gonna talk about it. To really understand why Sea of Thieves was made the way it is, we must go back and examine the release and life of Destiny. While we could go back further, Destiny set the stage for online games as they are today. When Bungie, the creators and developers of the acclaimed Halo series, paired up with Activision to do something new, gamers knew something big was going on. The announcement and subsequent alpha and beta tests for what we now know as Destiny only served to ignite the flames of hype surrounding the game. The shooting and traversal mechanics were nearly perfect, the world was beautiful and seemed full of characters and things to do, and the story and plot were intriguing. Destiny may have been one of the most hyped up games in the last decade, on similar levels with No Man's Sky, but when the game released to lukewarm reviews, longtime Bungie fans and people who played the beta were shocked. Destiny was praised for its incredible combat, beautiful graphics and world design, and having an addictive gear grind aimed to keep you getting better equipment and eventually the best gear possible. However, what it lacked was something that would damage the game long term and would require Bungie to release multiple expansions to finally fix. The game's story was bland and uninspired, and after completing the main storyline and grinding for most of the gear, Destiny became a repetitive routine of completing 1 or 2 weekly events, grinding the same few strikes, and waiting 15 plus minutes for an event to spawn in the world, which only has a small percentage of dropping the items you need. So how did Destiny maintain a large player count even when most people had completed nearly all there was to do? That is where the promise of future content comes in. Before Destiny even launched, you could buy the expansion pass, which would give you access to the first 2 expansions the game would offer. Knowing that there's more content coming, even if it's not currently accessible, is something that motivates players to continue playing so that they can be as ready for that new content as possible. It took Destiny 3 expansions to be able to fix most of the game's issues, and by that time they'd already lost a lot of their players. The game lived on because of the promise of more content to come, and that content did eventually fix the game. However, is that something we as gamers want to allow developers to do? Is it acceptable if developers release games with a lackluster amount of content, just enough to get us by until they release their next update? If you bought everything upon release, Destiny would have cost you nearly $100 by the time the Taken King expansion came out and solved a lot of the game's problems. Or you could wait a year or even longer and get the self-branded Complete Edition, which implies the game's original release wasn't even complete in the first place. This is the kind of business model publishers and developers are aiming to go with when they talk about games as a service, and why online and social focused games like Sea of Thieves may be in serious danger. Destiny was not the only game to release with similar structure and thus similar issues. The Division was released with a very similar online shared world experience, a loot grind, and a lack of endgame. While you could go to the Dark Zone, a place where PvP is allowed, and try to grind for better gear, it was full of hackers and high-level players who just wanted to ruin your day. Again, this game lost many of its players. Nearly 2 years later, the game has finally been fixed tremendously and is seeing an influx of players once more. But the game wasn't in its proper state for 2 whole years. Destiny 2 released last year with a lot of improvements upon the first iteration, but still having a season pass before the game's release and offering much more egregious microtransactions. The shaders in Destiny 2, which allow you to color your gear, were made to be a one-time use consumable. Unlike the first game where you could change them out infinitely, once you use a shader, it's gone. The only way to get shaders you want is to grind for them again or purchase them with real money, and what you get with that real money is a randomized engram that might not have the specific shader you want, meaning you'll have to buy more. Then of course, you have the Battlefront 2 fiasco, where it was much easier to buy items and characters in the game than it was to actually play to earn them. There was a point where DICE had the microtransactions set up to where it would take you 4,528 hours or $2,100 to unlock all the base content. Everything was loot box based, and thus everything you bought would be randomized. And worse, all of these games that we've talked about cost $60 for the initial purchase, $10 to $20 per expansion, plus the cost of optional microtransactions. All of this is to say that these developers and publishers are designing games in such a way that allows them to make as much money as possible. Again, is this something we should accept? Do we want to send the message to developers who are milking us for all we have that we're okay with spending more money to complete the game that we already bought? Take-Two said that they want all of their future games to feature, quote, recurrent consumer spending opportunities, and EA has said that even after they lost out on sales and goodwill for Battlefront 2's problems, that, quote, live services that include optional digital monetization, when done right, provide a very important element of choice that can extend and enhance the experience is in our game, end quote. So even though most gamers speak out against them and feel they're causing developers to provide less content for the buy-in price in lieu of making money for recurrent spending, publishers are still adamant about their place in games. Why? Because they make an insane amount of money. Out of EA's $1.23 billion revenue in the last quarter, $787 million of it was from live services, with only $260 million being from game sales. Over triple the profit on things bought after the original purchase of the game. This is why it seems so many games are going down this route. It may make gamers less happy, but it makes companies significantly more money in the long run. And for businesses, money is the only thing that talks. Enter Sea of Thieves. Microsoft and Rare, the developers of Sea of Thieves, obviously saw the massive monetary success of the previous titles mentioned, as well as what was seemingly lacking or could be changed for the better. Thus, Sea of Thieves was born. And let's be honest, the premise of Sea of Thieves is unique. Go alone or gather your friends up to and explore an open world as a pirate, find buried treasure, take over islands haunted by the dead, and team up with other players in the same world that can do the same things as you can. Fight, loot, and cause mayhem. In theory, Sea of Thieves should be a game that everyone who's ever had a remote interest in the pirate life should want to play for hours on end. So why has it been so polarizing, with many people playing for hours with their friends and others bashing the game with only a few hours clocked in? Where did Rare potentially go wrong, and what did they do right that most people aren't getting to see? There are quite a few complaints about the game that are well founded. People have said there are not enough enemy variations, of which there are only 10 under any form. The quests are repetitive, the game gets boring after a few hours, it's not fun in single player, there's no real progression, you can only buy cosmetic items and no upgrades or variations on already owned items, and the game isn't worth its $60 price tag, to name a few. Do some of these issues sound familiar? Many of them are the same things that plagued the likes of Destiny and The Division upon their release. What is more intriguing about Sea of Thieves though is that the game is centered on being more like an MMO than those other titles and does not offer the purchase of a season pass. So what is the hook, pun intended, that would keep people playing, and what do people who purchase the game have to look forward to? Are all of these expectations reasonable, or are they founded because of overhype and expectations that were beyond what the game has planned to offer in the first place? Rare has seemingly done all they can to set expectations as to what Sea of Thieves is about and will contain. There were multiple betas which everyone could play in, tons of trailers and videos from the developers about the game, and as many people writing reviews and previews of the betas and builds they saw as was possible. Rare made it clear that what was in the final beta was exactly how the game was, but that the full release would have more content. Everything about this was true. There are more trading companies, more quest types, more things to buy, and more places to go. However, the motivation and purpose for playing this game has never been too clear. This is the biggest flaw in the marketing of Sea of Thieves and why so many people feel disappointed. Rather than a deep and complex dive into the world of pirates with character progression, tons of weapon types and enemies to fight, a compelling story full of pirate lore, and a huge variety of landmasses, shipwrecks, and dungeons, players of Sea of Thieves were greeted with zany cartoon graphics, simplistic combat, mainly cosmetic upgrades, and relatively similar islands and other areas. As I noted earlier, there's also no season pass or slated expansions in the works, and while we have heard from the developers about some additional content coming to the game, Sea of Thieves' future is uncertain. So what was Rare thinking? Or are we just missing something critical about the game's design? As I mentioned in my review, playing Sea of Thieves alone is something entirely plausible, but is not nearly as enjoyable as playing with the crew. It's also true that I've had a ton of fun playing with my friends and being obnoxious and silly. I've made some memories that I will remember for years to come I couldn't have made anywhere else. The reason for this is that Sea of Thieves is a game focused more on being a social hub to have fun, hanging out with your friends as pirates, messing around with other people, and having some laughs while sailing the open seas and collecting that coveted pirate booty. It's the same reason each character has an instrument to play, the actual character models look so silly, and why the graphics and art style were designed the way they were. The game is about having fun, interacting with other people, and doing some light pirate role-playing while you're at it. In earnest, it's an experiment that is one of the first of its kind from a first-party publisher, and also a game that entirely fails to market itself as such. Gamers are conditioned to look at the content of a game, search out the story, progression, depth and complexity, and what the game tells you to do to determine its value and its worth. Sea of Thieves' value is not so tangible, and thus is entirely skipped over in search of where the traditional content is. Sea of Thieves was never meant to have RPG mechanics like character leveling, upgradable weapons, huge diversity in quest types, or an intensely compelling story. The content in the game is simply there to compel you and your crew to create your own story and serve as a catalyst to get you exploring and encountering other players. The appeal of the game comes in seeing your friends fire themselves out of cannons, falling off of the ship into the water while you're sailing at full speed, screaming as they plummet into the depths, desperately trying to empty the water out of your ship as it begins to capsize, and the amazing feeling of fending off multiple ships and killing their inhabitants, leaving all their loot for you. While these are all just moments, each of these and the hundreds more like them are all centered around the fun and silly social interactions this game is focused on. Drink too much and you can fill a bucket with your vomit and throw it on your crew. Someone making you angry on your crew? Lock them in the brig. Sea of Thieves is a game made with social encounters, humorous moments, and making memories with friends and strangers in mind. With all that said, we come back to the reason that the game is so polarizing. Sea of Thieves has brought to light something we as gamers, as well as game publishers and developers, need to work together to address. For decades, games have been placed in certain genres, and within those genres, we allowed a certain amount of leeway with the amount of deviation from what defines games in that genre. In the last couple of years, games have begun to take aspects of multiple different genres and mash them all together, leaving them in a weird gray area between genres. When someone asks you what type of game Destiny is, and you say a first-person shooter RPG light shared world game, no one knows what that means or looks like. To quote part of IGN's review of Destiny, "The endgame might hook you for the long haul once you fully understand it, but Destiny is ultimately unable to be all of the different games it's trying so hard to be." End quote. You shouldn't have to learn to understand what a game wants from you to play it. This is Sea of Thieves' biggest fault, and it's one we truly have never seen before with a game of this type. Sea of Thieves doesn't know what it really is, and because it's a new type of game with a relatively novel motivation for playing, it doesn't know how to market itself and how to describe itself to potential players. Sea of Thieves wants you to play it continuously and wants to be an online games as a service for years to come, but its value proposition and reasoning for spending more money and time with the game is not clear to most consumers. Online games as a service are the future of gaming. Whether we like it or not, when this much money is made and revenue from game sales has tripled by purchases and live services, companies would be stupid not to chase those dollar signs. However, the problem that the gaming industry is facing right now is how to balance how much content needs to be in the game at launch, how much content to trickle out, how long to wait between drops, and how to explain to potential buyers what online and live services mean for their game. For years, we've paid $60 to have all the content on the disc and maybe paid for an expansion or DLC that was substantial at some point after launch. Now, games like Destiny, The Division, Sea of Thieves, and Battlefront 2 are launched with a base version of the game with a content plan set up for the next couple of years. This means rather than getting everything into the game for launch, companies are picking and choosing what to leave out and add later post-launch. Most of the time, the audience is left in the dark until these pieces of content are close to actually coming out and don't know what is coming or how much more there will be. While they wait, they play a game that offers them much less than another, more fully fleshed out title would, or they get sucked into an addictive loot grind specifically made to keep you playing and buying. While in theory, there's nothing inherently wrong with this approach if it's done right, it seems many mainstream games that are adopted to the games as a service model are treated just like regular buy and get a complete package games. You simply cannot market Sea of Thieves in the same way that you can market God of War or Horizon Zero Dawn. If you're going to make a game that is focused on social encounters instead of more complex and diverse content, that is something something that needs to be known to the players. If we have the expectation that we are just getting a starter edition with many free and paid updates coming in the future, then backlash like Sea of Thieves has experienced won't be seen as frequently. Many gamers, through no real fault of their own, expected Sea of Thieves to have tons of different content and quests to do, locales of all shapes, design, and sizes, a multitude of ships, weapons, and equipment. How were they to know that this wouldn't be the case if no one ever explained the real point of the game? If the future of games is one where single player, mostly complete packages are sold along games that have continuous updates, live services, and microtransactions built into the core foundation, we need to develop a better way of informing buyers of what kind of game they are purchasing. We also need to develop a more transparent pricing model where people can know that for $60, they're buying a game that will force them to pay additional money down the road to experience all of the planned content. Many people had no idea that Sea of Thieves was built with the games as a service model, and for $60, they want to be able to jump in and have tons of content. When you can spend $60 on a different game that you can play for 250 hours and still have things to do, why would consumers buy a game that seems like it has no real variety and is very bare bones instead? Online games are having an identity crisis, and games like Sea of Thieves, Destiny, The Division, and Battlefront 2 are all suffering from it. Sea of Thieves undoubtedly has some great things going for it, but its lack of proper identity and messaging, seemingly bare bones traditional content, no real accommodation for single player gameplay, and the motivation and purpose for playing going unarticulated have caused the game to lose its legs before it had the chance to properly earn them. Unfortunately, Sea of Thieves also won't be the last game to shoot itself in the foot like this, and with games like Anthem coming, which is claimed to be a live service model while also being claimed to be BioWare's last shot, the future of online games and their developers may be in serious trouble. Now, I want to continue the discussion with you guys, especially after all of the feedback I received on my Sea of Thieves review. So in the comments below, leave your opinions. Tell me if you agree or disagree. Have I changed your opinion on Sea of Thieves at all? Do you think that maybe with better messaging, you wouldn't have been as disappointed, or you might have been even happier with the game when it came out? I'd also like to note that Sea of Thieves is free on Game Pass, so for $10 a month, you can play Sea of Thieves for free. So it's technically not $60. A lot of people were saying that in the review, but if you just pay $10, you can play it for a month, and that'll probably be enough for you if that's all you want to play and you weren't going to really like it anyway. So yeah, this game isn't regularly $60. You can buy it for $60, or you can just get Game Pass and have that and 100+ other games to play. Also, if you like the content that I do, it would help me so much if you'd head over to the Patreon, which has a link in the description and is in the first comment of the video, and consider donating even just $1. Everything helps, and one day I want to go full-time and make twice as much content as I do right now and work on some really ambitious projects. So again, anything there helps. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and let's continue to create the greatest gaming community in the world. I'll see all you guys in the next video.